All right, here we go. Welcome back, world history people, wherever you are in the world. We are beginning a pretty important topic in history if we're going to talk about America um, and exploration and all sorts of other things. This is the Protestant Reformation. This comes after our Renaissance, after Italy, and then the rest of Northern Europe does its thing after, and without it would not be possible. Well, it might have been more difficult. But without the greatest invention of all time, without the printing press, the Protestant Reformation owes so much to not have to write everything by hand. So here we go. All right. Now, some of the key questions. Let's back up for a second. I got ahead of myself. I'm so excited about the printing press. All right. So some of the key questions to look at with this unit and with this time period in history. One, I did it again. What was it like to be part of the Catholic Church in the 1400s? Remember, we've had the plague and the Crusades, and we've had kings starting to pop up saying, no, listen to me. I have your best interest at heart. Because, the Pope is great, and the Pope can, help you reach the afterlife, but you got to live here until you get there. So why don't you let me help take care of, your here stuff? So that's going on in the Catholic Church. They're facing a lot of changes, a lot of internal struggle, maybe some restructuring. How did Martin Luther, not Martin Luther the King, but how did Martin Luther challenge the Catholic Church? How does this Protestantism spread? And once it does spread, and once this Reformation does take place, what are the effects in England? And again, there are effects in a whole lot of other places, but in the construct of us studying the history of the world or the history of Europe, its impact on us because we're Americans, then how the Reformation affected England kind of matters. It's not the only people it affected, but just understand why we're heading in that way. All right. These are just some of the key terms and the key people that you will come across, that you may see, that you may read in some of the work that's assigned and some of the readings that you have to do in whatever is assigned to you. Indulgences, purgatory. We've actually talked about some of these before the corona. The indulgences, purgatory, the man Martin Luther, theocracy. There's a name from the past. Excuse me, John Calvin, predestination, Henry VIII, annulled or annulment, which is a term you may have heard before, and then Elizabeth I, arguably the greatest English monarch. All right. We're going to look at some of the causes of the Reformation in a second. You can write this down if you want and make a little chart on your own time. The notes are here for you. Remember, if you have any questions about any of these slides, or if anything doesn't make sense to you, either through my lectures or through your assignments, 1 to 2:30, every Tuesday and every Thursday, I'm there for you. Send your questions. We'll even go back over some of the slides if we need to. So don't freak out when you see things like this or a lot of words or other things flashing in front of your eyes. Pause it, write it down, take a breath, and then come talk to me or come see me this way, Tuesdays and Thursdays. So the main idea of the Protestant Reformation is just this, that people began to criticize the Catholic Church. They began to look at some of the decisions the Catholic Church was making and not agreeing with them, or not seeing them as being solely what they believed God would want. So you're starting to get, it's the rumblings, it's the very, very beginnings of a protest movement, like open this state now kind of thing, or Black Lives Matter, or the 60s, or no taxation without representation. Excuse me. That kind of thing is beginning to grow right now. The Roman Catholic Church was still wealthy. Let me move me around here. Was still very powerful. It's still the Catholic Church. Everybody is still predominantly Catholic. And if you want to get to heaven, not a bad idea to listen to what they have to say. The Catholic Church, like any other organization with power or with prestige over time, they begin to think, very, very highly of themselves, and they begin to spend and live in a very extravagant manner, and that takes money. And where do churches get their money? Us. By the 1500s, this lifestyle they were living begins to be the basis and the cornerstone of the reform movement, and it's the thing that the reformers really go after. Is what is the purpose of church? To get wealthy and live in beautiful cathedrals, or to serve the people in the will of God? So that's kind of where we're going as we head into the 1500s. With me? All right. Don't be afraid. It's just religion. They're also dissatisfied with the church. Again, they have financial corruption. Where's that money going? They know they have power over you, and they use that to their advantage. They see members of the church being immoral and living lives that aren't quite in keeping with how they're supposed to be. And again, if you're going to be guilty of financial corruption, oh, come on, please work. Financial corruption, and if you're going to abuse your power, then you're going to need money, and money comes from us. So the peasants, the people, those are the people they tax, and they force us to pay lots and lots in tithes, and that's how the church gets their swag, really. All right, moving on. The church now did finance Renaissance artists for some extreme, I'm getting ahead of myself here, I'm getting all excited. For some really, really, really extravagant and beautiful projects, mainly buildings, some statuary buildings. They taxed middle class peasants, us, so that they could fund these projects. And then the slide that I got a little ahead of myself there. That's one of those projects that the church funded, and you can see why the everyday man might be a little upset with what they're doing. All right, Pope Leo X, X is 10, remember? He was the Pope during this time period, and he used this money to construct St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. It's a beautiful, beautiful cathedral. And he also approved this whole idea of indulgences, and we'll get to, that's a horrible line, and we'll get to what those are in a minute. But this Pope said, yeah, those are fine. Go ahead. No, I'm good with that, because it brings money to the church, and I am the church. So he was okay with these, and we'll get to why Martin Luther and John Calvin and Zwingli, I can never pronounce the name, we'll get to it when I see it, how these people came to be like, no. All right, we're good? Remember, pause at any time. This is the basilica that was built. It is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful structure, but that's money that could have gone to other people, could have gone to orphanages, could have gone to the poor, could have gone to anything, but it went to that. And they did that because they could, because there was no check on their power, because nobody said, no one opposed them. Because remember, going back to the Middle Ages and going back to the last unit, the church could kick you out if you spoke against them. If you were considered a heretic, or if you spoke up against what they were saying, then they could deny you sacraments. They could excommunicate you from the church if they were feeling really salty. They could excommunicate your whole village. Remember the whole idea of interdiction. And because of the importance of church and heaven and God in the lives of people back then, to stand up to the church was a huge risk. So no one did for the longest time. And then eventually, with the printing press and people reading the Bible for themselves and reading other things, you begin to develop your own take and your own opinion, and you begin, we can all read the same book, and we'll all get some of the same stuff out of it, because a story is a story. But some of us may pick up something more about this character. Someone may see a different symbolism or a different meaning. And so when you read, this is what happens. And this is what happened with the Bible. People start to read it and see it differently. All right? So here we go. Now, what the indulgences were. I told you we'd get to these. Indulgences are pardons for your soul. So you could buy forgiveness you could buy less time in purgatory. And what is purgatory? Why, it's right here. It's where your souls have to go to work off your sins before you get to heaven. Um, in the Catholic Church, you die and then you go to purgatory. You don't go die heaven. It's purgatory, and however sinful dictates how long you stay in purgatory. So if you could buy an indulgence, then you could. Oh, my brother is calling me right now. Then you could shorten that time in purgatory, and that's pretty bad. But towards the end, it got to the point where they wanted money. They would buy indulgences from anybody. So I could say, hey, listen, Pope Leo the 10th, or actually probably not the Pope, but Bishop Mayers, look, here's some money. Can you forgive my uncle? He's been dead 10 years. If I give you this, can you shorten his time in purgatory? So people started actually paying to get their dead relatives a quicker route to heaven. And these were sort of the final straw to Martin Luther and others, and we'll get to that in just a second. But that's what the indulgences were. They were a way to shorten. It's a fast pass to heaven. You don't have to wait in line for 4 hours at Pandora. You buy your fast pass. For those of you who've been to Disney, it's the best ride at Disney. I haven't been since Star Wars opened yet, but Pandora, get a fast pass. And you just wait in that line instead of waiting in the all-call line. And we all know what that's like if you've been to Disney. All right. Now, moving on. Another thing that's going on during this time period is this idea of nationalism, and we've spoken of this before as well. Remember, ism is a belief. It is devotion to a particular state. That should be or nation. Now remember, states, and in case you don't know, states are a group of people. They don't have to be a country. A nation and a country, this is the same thing. Nation is a synonym for country. All right. So either a state, which is like a group of people, like the oh no, you know what? No, whole thing's wrong. All right. Okay. This is the country. This is the group of people. Okay. So this is USA. This, come down here, is like the Cherokee. It's a nation. It's a cultural group. Or the Kurds, or the Palestinians. It's people who don't have a country of their own, but they're a group of people and they would like a country. They have their own set of beliefs. They have a culture. A state is a country. Only in America does that get confusing. So I'm so sorry about that. So people are becoming loyal to where they're from. The idea of being English or German or French begins to grow during this time period because, well, England and France exist during this time period. Germany, not so much, but that's where the whole nation thing comes in. And states like the state of Prussia or other, there are like 300 states in what is Germany now back then. So, but they're becoming loyal to someone like having a home team. Okay. And people are seeing themselves becoming loyal to this first, then church. So the Catholic Church, although it's important, is starting to take a backseat just a little bit to the idea of where you're from, of my people. And the idea of having a people is beginning to grow during this time period. All right. Like it says below there, like I'm German. I'm a German who happens to be Catholic. I'm not a Catholic. And that's a big shift that comes about during this time period. And it's another one of those little chinks in the armor and the power of the Catholic Church. Ooh, growing. Okay. Now, one of the first reformers during this time period is this guy right here. No, I'm kidding. It's this guy right here. It's John Wycliffe. And notice this is 1324. This is during the later part of the Middle Ages, almost pre-Renaissance. This is very, very, very early. Remember, all these events in time, whether it be fall of Rome into the Middle Ages, or the Middle Ages into the Renaissance, or the Renaissance into this whole Reformation and then into the Enlightenment, they overlap. They're not just discrete. Stop, start, stop, start. So there's always things going on together. Okay, John Wycliffe was very interested in the authority of the church. Like, how much authority or power should the church have? And notice here too that he believed that people should be able to read and interpret the Bible on their own. Remember, most people couldn't read, so the Bible you got was from your priest. The service was typically in Latin. Most people couldn't read Latin, so he begins to think that maybe the Word of God would be best served if each of us could kind of ingest on our own. Okay, he lived during the schism, the Great Schism, when there was more than one pope, when that church officially splits, and sort of an unforeseen or a surprise circumstance, because there was more than one pope. Then you begin to question, well, if there's if there's more than one pope, then maybe there should be more than two popes, or maybe four popes, or who really is in charge? Because for the longest time, it was God and then a pope. Well, now it's not God and a pope. It's God and popes. And as I said a while ago, for a brief moment in the history of the world, there were three popes. All right. Now, another early reformer was Jan Hus, and again, 1369 to 1415. We're heading into the Renaissance now. He thought that maybe bishops should be elected and not appointed by the Pope, so that the people could choose who their representative should be, not the Pope, who's way away in Rome, and I'm over here in Oxford. At the Council of Constance, councils are typically meetings amongst members of the clergy, the higher parts of the clergy. He made his case, and because he spoke out against the norms of the church, and because he offered a difference of opinion, he was burned at the stake. And he is the spiritual leader of the Moravian Church. And if you've ever been to, those of you growing up in North Carolina, if you ever went to Old Salem in the fourth grade, there are Moravians there. And my only experience with Moravians are those really good Moravian ginger cookies, which is really not the best way to talk about a religion from the standpoint of knowing anything. But just understand that he is the spiritual leader of these people, and these people actually live in North Carolina, and that's kind of cool. Erasmus is another early reformer, and Erasmus was also a person from the Renaissance. This lovely quote here, I do not know to whom it's attributed, but Erasmus laid the egg that Luther hatched, and you can think about what that means for a second. Erasmus is one of the he is the term from the last unit. Erasmus was, if not one of the humanists of humanists. He was a humanist. He remained committed to reforming the church his whole time. He also held to but at the same time, see, he's a reformer. Okay, all reform means you're trying to correct or fix it, tweak it. You're not throwing it away and starting over. You're not rebuilding. You're just reshaping. To reform is to reshape. And so there are parts of the church that he takes issue with, but not all of them. He did like the idea in the Catholic Church of free will, that we are all free will. We are all free to choose whether we believe or not. It is not sort of the idea that it's already been laid out and we're just going through the motions. Some Protestant reformers do not believe in free will, and they believe in the doctrine of predestination, which your destiny is predetermined, is what this means in a nutshell. The idea that God's already got it all laid out, and we're just going to go through our life, and we're either saved or not, but God already knows. Well, if that's the case, what's your motivation to be good? You can someone ask that question Tuesday, or ask that question when we meet next, and we can talk about it a little bit. Because I have an answer. Okay. Another reformer, so we're good. Remember, if it gets going too fast, the beauty of this, hit pause, take a break, get a drink, get a snack, go pet your dog, go for a walk, and then come back. I'm not going anywhere. I'm here for you. All right. Now, here it is again. Look, it's so important. It makes two different PowerPoints. That's how important this is. I cannot stress enough that this is the greatest invention in the history of all mankind. Okay, now, the printing press. Now, mass production, faster, cheaper. People who could read now could afford to read. People who couldn't read now it wouldn't be so expensive. It's worth the time to read. Look at the bottom. The biggest change right here, your volume of output. Oh, no, not that. That's silly. Okay, right here. Written by hand, 40 pages a workday. Printing press, 3,600 pages a workday. More books, lower prices, more words into your hands. Nothing wrong with that. All right. You can now get books whenever they want them. Books, pamphlets, newspapers. You can find out what's going on in the world now. And again, excellent question. Have an answer for me when we meet next. Okay, the printing press. Hello, most important thing in the world ever. All right. So those are some of your foundational speakers. Those are the guys who laid it all out for the people to come after them. A religious movement in the 1500s that split the Catholic Church in Western Europe and led to the establishment of a number of new churches. That's the Protestant Reformation. Now, now this not the goal. The, the goal for Martin Luther was not to split the church. Again, the word reform is in here. Reform. You just want to change it and bring it back to what they think are its roots. This was not a revolution. Notice it's not the Protestant Revolution, it's a Reformation. They just want to change things. Like they feel like they've lost a step. They don't know where they are. Okay? And again, for all the reasons we mentioned prior, they were tired of the financial corruption, of being overly taxed, and instead of that money going to the people, it goes to building beautiful cathedrals or fancy clothes or whatever. Abusing that power and immorality, not living a life that's true to God. And these are some of the things that get them angry. All right. So what happens to spark it? We spoke about this already, so we'll come back to it. Excuse me. Indulgences, buying forgiveness, that makes them so mad. Again, he wants to build, that's beautiful. By the way, this is where the Pope hangs out and the Pope speaks. If you ever watch, well, next Christmas Eve, if you think about it, at midnight, they have Mass here. And the Pope speaks here from time to time. Actually, Mass might be St. Paul's. Anyway, or Mass might be somewhere else. But the Pope does speak to audiences here when it's not, well, pandemic-y or raining. Well, it probably does in the rain. But this is in the Vatican. So the indulgences sparked the Reformation and Martin Luther's 95 Theses. He had 95 problems and he nailed them on a church door. 95 problems with the Catholic Church. Problems that he thought should be addressed and changed to just return the Catholic Church to what he felt was truer to Catholicism. Now, another issue here is that most uneducated people didn't understand Latin. We talked about this, but they knew their common language. They knew their vernacular. This is local language. This is if you live in Germany and you understand German or French or English, or that's what it is. Before the Reformation, almost all Bibles are written in Latin, which means that 95% of Europe can't read this book. And they're getting the word and the teachings sort of secondhand. And if you think about it, And this also, you can also tie this into to slavery and plantations in the American South pre-Civil War. There were churches and there were Bibles on plantations, and there are churches and there are Bibles in Europe. And the pre-Renaissance, the pre-Reformation Bibles are written in Latin. Now the Bibles in the slave South were English, but if you can't read English, it might as well be Latin. So whatever scripture you were given was given to you. You just took what they said and you believed that's what they were saying. Because down here, like it says, it was the job of the lay people in the church to translate the Bible to translate to the lay people. It was the job of the priests and the bishops who translate it so that we could understand it. Most of them probably translated it appropriately, but there are probably some who left stuff out or changed the words to get a different behavior from their group. It just depends. Again, if you don't know what's being said to you, if you can't read what's being said to you, whether it's the Bible or later in life, a mortgage or a contract, when you become a great athlete or a musician, then you're at the mercy of that document. They're at the mercy of this book. And Martin Luther begins to see that some of them aren't truly teaching the word as he sees it's written. Because remember, everybody's reading it, so everybody has a different take. Now, Martin Luther himself, there he is. He's a German monk. He was a professor of theology or religion at the University of Wittenberg. Remember, in German, if it's a W, you pronounce it like a V. Okay. He was one of many leaders of the Protestant Reformation. Luther objected to a saying attributed to Johann Tetzel, that as soon as the coin in the coffers ring, a soul from purgatory springs. In other words, and this is one of Martin Luther's biggest issues, was this whole idea of buying your way out of purgatory. What's that saying? It's saying, as soon as that coin hits the bottom of the can, a soul leaves purgatory. So as soon as the church gets that money, up your Uncle Louis goes. Or you, when you unfortunately die 2 years too soon. In 1517, he took 95 theses or problems and he nailed them to a church door. And it was that same church in Wittenberg. They were written in Latin. And again, notice it's in all bold, it's in all caps, because that matters. He was a Catholic, and all he wanted to do was fix the church. He just criticized a few things: the indulgences, the Pope perhaps having too much power, and the fact that the church was so wealthy didn't sit with him. Okay. And then another, probably the biggest thing of all, is this one down here. And the reason I say that this one is probably the biggest is because this stuff here happened over time. The Catholic Church has been around for 1,500-ish years now. Habits begin to form, ways of doing things. This is, in a way, this is the culture of the church. This is the culture of the high up of the Catholic Church. This is just part of being part of the church, part of the priesthood, the bishops, the Pope. The last part here, this gets into doctrine, to the word, to the Bible, to the meaning. And to the Catholics, good works get you to heaven. You can believe, remember, think about it. The whole reason that there's purgatory is because they're looking at what kind of life you lived. How sinful were you? What kind of things did you do while you were on earth? So did you do good did you do good Catholic works while you were on earth? Martin Luther doesn't see it that way. He says faith alone. If you believe in your heart that in the Catholic and Christian world that Jesus Christ died for your sins, that's all you need. If you truly believe and truly repent, it's faith alone is what Martin Luther believed. And so that's going to fly in the face of the Catholic Church. And that's ultimately what causes the big brouhaha between them. Moving on. All right. And as you can imagine, he was excommunicated. In 1520, Pope Leo X kicks him out of the Catholic Church. He's expelled from the church. The Holy Roman Emperor, that's more of a political leader, Charles V. He rules the Holy Roman Empire and Spain. He actually passed a law suppressing or not allowing Luther's writings to be shared or spread. But Luther finds a friend with some Lutheran princes in Germany, and we'll get to the Lutherans in a second. And they issued a protestatio. It's a protection order. It's a form of protest that allows him to keep writing and having his words be shared amongst the people. Notice that's right here. You see protest. And right here you see protests. They are Protestants. They are protesting the behavior of the Catholic Church. This was a protest movement, not a revolution. It just morphed into one. But they are protesting the behavior of the Catholic Church. Other reformers were Ulrich Zwingli in Switzerland. He actually believed in a theocracy, and the theocracy is a government in which the church and the state are one and the same, and they believe that the rules that govern a country are inspired by God. So the Word of God or the teachings of God guide people's lives. That was Ulrich Zwingli. John Calvin in Switzerland is the creator of the Calvinists. Is a group, so it's a church actually, the Calvinists. And they actually believe in predestination, the idea that God knows who will be saved even before we're born. And again, going back to what I said earlier, how is that a good way to lead your people? Like, what would be the benefit of that? And I still kind of think there is. And then John Knox in Scotland kind of goes from here to here, lays the ground for the Presbyterian Church that we know here in America today, being established in Scotland. So these are some of the bigger reformers besides Martin Luther. Luther, Calvin, and it is important that we remember people like Hus, Erasmus, and the others who laid this foundation during the Renaissance of just beginning to question, is this truly what the church should be doing or how men should be thinking or behaving? Now, we said before, this will matter to us, and this is where it starts. In England, the Reformation began with the king, and that king was Henry VIII. Henry VIII had 6 wives. 6 wives. 6 wives. 6 wives. That's a lot of wives. All he wanted was a son. That's why he kept having wives, because his wives either couldn't give him any children, or they gave him daughters. 2 of them became queens. He did have one son. He just didn't live very long. He wasn't very healthy. So don't worry about this. This is someone else's stuff. Remember, I bought my notes. But Henry VIII matters because Henry VIII sets up the Church of England, and England settles here, and that church comes here. So it kind of matters. These are his 6 wives. Catherine of Aragon, he divorced her. Anne Boleyn, she was beheaded. Jane Seymour died. Anne of Cleves, divorced. Catherine Howard, beheaded. And then Catherine Parr survived. All right. So these were his wives. Now you may or may not know this, but until recently, and I don't know how recently, so don't hold it against me. If you have friends or if you are Catholic, ask somebody and then let me know. But for the longest time, you could not be divorced in the Catholic Church. I believe marriage could be annulled if it was shortly thereafter. But marriage was till death do you part. Whoops. So he wanted divorces, and a couple of times he got the Pope to annul it, and then the Pope's like, I don't think so there, Henry, my boy. So some things happened. There was a gathering that led to the decision that England was no longer under the authority of the Pope. The Pope said, you can't have any, I'm not going to annul these marriages, you can't divorce these women. So Henry VIII is like, fine, I'm Henry VIII. I'm the King of England. I'll start my own religion. And he does. And he thinks about it and thinks about it. So, okay, let's see. I'm the King of England. Perfect. So he creates his church. The Church of England. Why not? Or the Anglican Church. And the act of supremacy makes him the head of the church. I'm not quite sure if that makes it a theocracy or not, only because in England it's kind of the other way around. It's a king running the church, not the church running the king. So I'm not quite sure it's a theocracy because I can't see Henry VIII carrying around a Bible going, hey, all the these and thous, do it here. So I don't quite think this falls in the line of theocracy. It's just a guy who's king saying, I'm king, my church. All right. Now, the effects of this decision to leave the Catholic Church, because think about it. Before he does that, England's a country full of Catholics. And then one day their king's going to be like, nope, we don't have to listen to the Pope anymore. But again, if you're Joe Commoner, or in this case, John or Sarah, let's start in English, and you're a good Catholic, this is not good. Because there's the fear that maybe the Pope excommunicates you or interdicts the entire Catholic population of England. I don't know, but it's not good and it's scary because the Pope and God are. So some of the effects. He has 3 children. I told you, Mary, Elizabeth, and then Edward was young. Edward dies. Queen Mary, or Bloody Mary, that's the one. Was raised Catholic like her mother, Catherine of Aragon. Catherine of Aragon came from Spain, which explains the Catholicism. She established the Catholic Church in England. She killed many Protestants, had approximately 300 heretics. Remember what a heretic is. Had them burned at the stake, and that's how the name Bloody Mary came to her. So and then her sister, Queen Elizabeth, she was raised a Protestant, and she ruled England for 44 years. She was the one who ruled England during the Spanish Armada. She ruled England during the Lost Colony and the Amedas and Barlow and the settling of North Carolina. She was alive during our good friend Sir Walter Raleigh, our city's namesake. She is rumored to have had a thing for Sir Walter Raleigh. The state of Virginia is named for her. The first child born in the colonies, Virginia Dare, was named for her. Yeah. And she was known as the Virgin Queen because she never got married. Because back then that mattered. Okay. So that is a very brief view of the Reformation, of the changes and the questions that people had, based on people had of the Catholic Church and the Catholic Church's behavior with respect to what they felt the Catholic Church was supposed to do. And you can see that England was split, and other countries are going to be split, and there are going to be wars fought over which religion should you follow, which religion should have authority, for years in England. So this is and in Europe, this is a big deal. And a couple of things. One, this is a breakdown of denominations after the fact, and we started with this. Again, it all begins with Judaism, and then there's the Roman Catholic Church, and then we have the splits, Eastern Orthodox, or the Oriental Orthodox, which we didn't talk about. And then this is the Reformation right here. Okay, Anglican Church, that's England. Lutherans, that's in Germany. The Reformed, and that gets you to the Presbyterians, and then the Anabaptists, which are a different group altogether, and that gets you to Mennonites, Quakers, and Amish, a whole different group. But it's the Anglican group over here. It's the Henry VIII group that gets you to a lot of the denominations that you know of today here in America. Your Baptists, your Episcopalians, your Methodists, your Pentecostals, Seventh-day Adventists, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons. All of those are able to eventually come into existence because of this Reformation. So the legacy of this is huge. And then one more thing to think about before we stop for today and we pick up with this little bit of foreshadowing. Do you honestly think that the Catholic Church is quietly going to let all this happen? If you think no, then you're right. And we'll talk about that tomorrow. Be good, everybody. Stay safe.